Again, ladies and gentlemen, at this time I'd like to call the Tuesday, March 10th, 2015 special call meeting to order. It's approximately 6:04 p.m. A roll call, Madam Clerk.
Councilman Williams?
Here.
Councilwoman Fairclough?
Here.
Councilman Burgess?
Here.
Vice Mayor Shelley?
Here.
Mayor Porter?
Here. Tab 1 is the discussion on Seminole Theater operation. Mr.
Mayor, we
Manager.
have our consultant, our theater expert, Duncan Webb, who is here to give a brief presentation. Just to remind everybody, Mr. Webb wrote the book on running theaters. And Duncan, what was the name of the book?
Running Theaters.
Running Theaters. Running Theaters. So you can get it on Amazon if you want to buy it. And with that, Duncan.
$13.95. Mr. Mayor, members of council, thank you for inviting me back to speak with you again. Just wait till my slides are up. Excellent. So I'm a management consultant to people who build, renovate, and operate theaters. I've been doing this work for 28 years now, roaming around the country working for cities, schools, developers, and arts groups, helping them think about building, fixing, and running this very particular type of building. I was here in 2014. You had me here last year to help you think about whether or not you should complete the renovation of the Seminole Theater, which you began some years ago. And a community group and many in the community have urged this action, and you made some progress years ago. And I was brought back in to help you consider, should you complete the renovation, did the market conditions exist that suggested that the theater could succeed if it was renovated to be something like a community arts center. So in last year, we did this study that looked at audience demand, user demand, meaning who are the artists and arts organizations and educational programs that need and want access to something like the Seminole Theater. We looked at the other facilities that serve the market area and tried to decide if the Seminole might be sort of distinctive in terms of competing for audiences and programs. And we also looked at the question of how does the Seminole Theater move you forward as a community towards the goals that you've set for Homestead, things like downtown revitalization, cultural tourism, economic development, and so on. So we did that work, and I was here a year ago presenting the results of that to you. And just as a reminder, we said it's a good idea. You should complete the renovation. Those demand and supply issues confirm the validity of the idea of activating the theater. We said the market is there, but we said it's very important to reflect the fact that whatever you do in the Seminole should be authentic, should reflect the diversity of your community, and it has to be affordable. It can't just be, you can't just be doing the things like they do at the, the New World Symphony or at the Arts Center in Miami. You have to do things that are authentic to your community, that your community can afford and in fact wants to participate in. We saw that there's demand for more and better facilities on the part of groups. It was quite clear to us that this building could be absolutely unique within the region in terms of its size, shape, character, function, and accessibility. And we saw that there's a tremendous opportunity to serve the city's larger goals around community and economic development. So we recommended that you should continue to renovate and reopen the Seminole as a community arts center. And what that means is a building that serves a range of individual artists, arts organizations, educational programs, and other important constituencies in your community that need and want access to the building. So it's not reopening it for one group to do their thing, it's reopening it to be many things for many people in your community. We suggested sort of developing programming in and for the local community. We really liked the idea of partnering with Miami-Dade College, given that they're neighbors, and they've expressed a significant demand for space for their sort of arts programs and for teaching programs. We said you need to outfit it with all the technology and sort of support facilities that it needs to be an active facility. And then we said you should bring it to life with a combination of rental activity, both sort of for arts organizations and then meeting and event business. Oh yeah, sorry. So meeting and event rentals, presented performances, film, and educational programs. So bring it to life with a combination of these things. Then we looked a little bit at this point, at that point last year, at what are the various ways that you could operate the building, and we considered a range of options. It could be city-run, in which a department or an agency connected to the city could operate the building. Perhaps you could have a third-party contract with a venue, either a nonprofit or a for-profit operator who you hire. You could bring in a new or an existing nonprofit in your community, or it could be school-run. So now, a year later, we're back. You allocated the funding. The architects have been working like mad, and you're close to having bids on the renovation of the theater. So the city staff then said, well, we better sort of speed up a little bit in thinking about how we're going to operate the theater as and when it opens, theoretically, potentially even next fall. So we came back to address those, particularly those operating issues. And what we've suggested based on, I've been here twice already in the last 2 months, meeting with various individuals and organizations on this question of how you put an operator in place. And our recommendation to you is that you have a competitive bid process that will allow you to cast the net as widely as possible so as not to miss any potential operating possibilities. We like that approach because it's a competitive process and it will motivate potential operators to put their very best proposal forward. And the other thing that's important in that writing that invitation, it's a good way to make sure that you and staff and the citizens in the community of Homestead are all on the same page in terms of what you want that operator to do when they get into the Seminole Theater. So more specifically, we are recommending to you a two-step process. And the first step would be to develop and issue a request for qualifications. So this is good because it's a relatively quick way to sort of invite individuals and organizations who are potentially interested in operating the theater to sort of throw their name into the hat. And we believe that working with staff that we can sort of get this RFQ written and out quickly. And the point of the RFQ will be to see who is interested, and then from that group, select individuals and organizations that have the relevant experience and are prepared to operate it in the way that the business planning work that we've already done suggests that it should be operated, which is to say, you know, it's not a place for one group to come and do its thing. It's a place for lots of artists and arts organizations locally and regionally to come and do their thing. So you have to have an operator who's essentially a sort of a dispassionate manager who can take care and balance all those different demands on the space. So go through that RFQ process and then pick out of that group the organizations and individuals who we feel are qualified and will do a potentially good job, and then issue to them a request for proposal, which is really just the technical proposal. So to tell us your approach, you know, how are you going to manage things like rentals to nonprofit organizations? How are you going to manage things like ticketing and food and beverage operations and backstage operations and security and safety? And what's your financial proposal? So what are you prepared to commit to do? What sort of guarantees can you make to the City of Homestead as to the level and quality of activity that you can bring to the Seminole Theater? How will you run the rental business for for-profit groups as opposed to nonprofit groups? So it's a much more technical proposal with a financial proposal that should then allow you to make a decision to put that operator in place. I've attempted to sort of map out a sort of a timeline. So let's say that you're generally comfortable with the approach that we're putting forward. We could get that RFQ out hopefully by the end of the month. We get RFQs back, we get proposal qualifications back mid-April. We evaluate, then we issue that second RFP, that technical proposal early May. RFPs back a couple weeks later. Then we interview, look at potential operators, present recommendations back to you in June, go through a process of negotiating and contracting, and hopefully, maybe we have that operator in place by August 1st. Now, I'm sure with your experience you can tell that's a fairly aggressive timeline, but given the possibility that you want the Seminole Theater to be potentially open end of next October, we feel it's important to be able to move that quickly through that process in order to have the operator in place. But there is a challenge with this. So, because even if we sort of manage that process and we get the operator in place by August, there's still the possibility that that operator would not have the sufficient time to put together the type of opening that I know you would want to have for the Seminole Theater. If, in fact, the theater can be sort of reopened, renovated and reopened at the end of October, that's not too bad in terms of, getting staff into the building and taking care of safety, but things like booking the sort of acts and marketing the events and doing all the logistics around having a great opening, it just makes me a little nervous. So on that basis, I've also recommended to staff that you consider the possibility that you might also want to hire an event planner separately from the operator. So, because that you could begin, you wouldn't have to wait until August to do that. It would simply be sort of a relationship with the city. It wouldn't be particularly expensive to hire sort of that, a fee-based event planner. But it's important because I know that the opening event itself is so important to you that you make sure that you've got enough time to plan that appropriately. And so what might that opening be? Over the years, I've seen lots of new and historic theaters reopen. So oftentimes there's an event, there's sort of a more sort of a fancy event. You get a great sort of entertainer to come and perform, and there's a reception or something like that, and you sort of thank people who've contributed over these many years to get the Seminole Theater reopened. But then you might also want to have on another day or maybe another time on that same day, you might want to have some other events there, sort of other groups on stage that reflect the diversity, the cultural diversity of your community, things that are more sort of accessible so that people in the community are invited to come into the building and they don't just have to be folks who've been sort of generous to the building over this time. And maybe even you'd also want to have sort of an open house. So lots of theaters, in fact, and they don't have an opening event per se, not just one event, they have a series of things that happen over a period of days. So there are significant skills required to do that. You've got to have someone who can sort of essentially develop a plan, develop a budget to go with that plan, book the talent, and I'm sure you sort of appreciate that you will want somebody who can find you the right sort of artist or entertainers, make a good deal, sort of have a good contract with them that they'll come and do their best in your community, promote the events, and then actually produce it in such a way that it's sort of it's a successful event that allows all the parts of your community to celebrate the reopening of the theater. And I think that if you do that, you'll be in a strong position whenever the theater reopens next fall or later, with this combination of a competitive bid process and the sort of contingency plan to separately hire an event planner, that you'll be ready when the building is ready to celebrate this great building as a centerpiece of the revitalization of Homestead.
Mayor, if I could, on the issue of the contingency plan, I know there may be some temptation tonight to start really thinking about decisions on the opening weekend or opening day stuff or this opening celebration things. I would just ask that you give us a little time to give you some options on that. One thing we've been thinking about internally is figuring out how one of the first events, the major event, in addition to things that are a little more open to the public, would be to have some sort of a large fundraising event as well to get the theater started, because as you know from the business plan, this theater is going to require subsidies, and so fundraising is going to be an important part of that. Hopefully within a few weeks, a month or so, we'll have a little better idea, even starting to think about potential operators, what are some of our fundraising possibilities as well, and then it will come back to you with some ideas. It would be helpful to us if we can get a decision from you tonight on two things. One is, are you comfortable with the RFQ, RFP process for a theater operator? And are you comfortable with us at least doing some solicitations on an event promoter, meaning we start calling and getting some quotes on what's available out there to do that? But in the meantime, we'll come back to you on the opening, because next week we intend to bring to you an item to award a contract for the contractor to start their work, and by then we'll have hopefully some clear dates for you on when the anticipated completion would be, recognizing that construction is not an exact science when you have to rely on, as we learned over at the temporary PD, other government agencies like fire to go in there and decide where else they want additional things. So we can all say we want it open by October 1st or 15th or whatever, but you know, we're going to need a little more information before we can declare when we think realistically it can be open. In the meantime, if in a few weeks we can have a much larger discussion on what the possibilities are. I can tell you, in one theater that I opened in another city, we did a bunch of things. One was a big ticket event, bring in talent, one which was paid for, and the other were volunteers. Broadway goes dark once a week, and all the Broadway stars came up for free, and each of them sang a showstopper song from their show, and it was one hit tune after the other, and people were willing to pay for that in a big ticket, and it raised a lot of money for the theater. We also paid, at the time, it was Bob Newhart, but we paid him to come, and people were also willing to pay for a celebrity because they can take pictures, and so we were able to fill the seats and generate revenue for that. But then we were also able to have smaller events and free events so that people could come and see the theater as well. But we need a little more time to kind of give you some of your options. But for tonight, first, if you have questions for Duncan, and secondly, if we could get some direction on the items that we're discussing.
Okay. Mr. Williams?
Yes, thank you so much, Mayor. My question has a lot to do with, where does the Seminole Theater Board fits into all of this process? Maybe someone from staff give me history on the board's perspective, the Seminole Theater Board. How do they fit in this fabric?
Sure. A couple of things. First of all, up until the bond referendum, the Seminole Theater Board had a contract with the city, and in essence, they had control over the facility. And also, the city was required to pay them an annual fee. What's happened since then is we had made an agreement with them that if the bond referendum was approved, they would basically cancel out the contract, the control of the facility would come back to us, and they would, and we asked them, and we hope they'll continue to serve in an advisory capacity. They still meet. We as staff meet with them regularly, and they certainly are interested in being a part of this, because this has been really their baby for years and years, and they're very proud of it, and they want to have input. There's other organizations that want to have input as well, but I know some of the board members are here if they want to talk a little bit about what they see their role as, because they've had some conversations already about that, and so they don't have the authority to control the facility anymore, but they certainly would like to have some input in the theater future. I know I saw Bronwyn around, and Bron, come on up, please. Oh, Linda, I'm sorry. Linda. Somebody come up.
But
Well, I'll move on to my second question then. I think I remember right when you said, George, and you said subsidies, that the city will have to put in almost, for the first couple of years, almost $500,000 or $400,000, or if I was reading your market study right, Is that-
Duncan, you had broken out, there was a pro forma that included how much outside funding, it wasn't specifically city, but it was broken down in outside fundraising and then potentially city subsidy.
Right. So as with all buildings like this, there's earned income, sort of ticket sales and rental, minus operating expenses, staffing and other things, leads to an annual funding requirement. So we suggested, given our knowledge of similar buildings in Florida and elsewhere, but we don't know for certain. We said, likely, hopefully some public sector support, and hopefully a combination of private sector support from individuals, corporations, naming rights, foundations, and sort of proceeds from special events. So that one of the things that will come out of the RFP process is if one of these operators, they will be asked to put forward specific financial proposals, not just what their fee is, but they'll be asked to project how they think the theater will perform under their management. And that will give us a much more precise sense of what it will take to sustain the theater. And they'll also address the question of how they will work with the city and the board, sort of acting as a friends group or whatever, to continue to raise money to sustain the operations.
Yeah, without outside funding, most of these theaters, particularly a 400-seat theater, there's not enough seats in the theater to, to be self-sustaining, unless, of course, you see it as an amenity. For example, let's see, most of our parks are not self-sustaining. They're an amenity that we have for residents, and so, there's costs associated with it. What we've seen with some theaters is if there is a fundraising apparatus of the theater, some sort of a volunteer board or a friends of, if they're very aggressive in their fundraising, and also if the theater operator is, I'd say, smart or lucky about what programs they have in there to enhance the community use of the theater. For example, sometimes if you pick the right act, you can generate revenue that way, but like all of Hollywood, you may think you got a hit show on your hands, and until opening night, or Broadway for that matter, you don't really know what's going to sell and what's not. Duncan, you haven't mastered the formula yet for what's a winning show, have you?
Be out of a job if somebody did.
So there's no doubt that one of the things we're going to be looking for with the new operator is what is their fundraising strategy? How do they see this thing running with as little subsidy from the city as possible? Because obviously this thing, I know we looked at a couple of cities, Miramar we just looked at, that spends a couple of $1 million on their theater, I believe. So we have to be very careful. Once you start bringing on a lot of staff, and it becomes a major money situation. So Linda is finally got the courage to come up, and you all had a conversation about. You all had a conversation at your last board meeting about
We
where
did.
you see yourselves, correct?
Yes, and at this point, we see ourselves in the advisory capacity and just helping with fundraising. We come from a very diverse walk of life, our board members, and we're still here. We still want to help. We still want to see it up and running, and we're glad to be of service. And there's like 8 to 9 of us that are here to help. And just to interject, it was a year ago this month we started walking the streets to get it built, and now the dream is coming true. Thank you.
Also, if I could, I emailed you all the preliminary sketches from the architect, so you're starting to see how it's morphing into something, and the theme is very understated, and trying to just utilize the budget as best as we can, because obviously the more put marble and granite and all kinds of other things, it gets very costly. So it's a very, it's a understated design, but it also, I think is at the very least not offensive, and it doesn't say much other than it's all about the show.
So back to my question.
Yes.
How much did the pro forma initially say that the city will have to put in? That was good, but I just want my question answered.
I think the total annual funding requirement was in the range of sort of 400,000, but that is all the fundraising you would do. So I didn't feel it was appropriate to identify the city's piece per se, because we don't really know as yet what's possible from the private sector.
We also, the pro forma was based on certain assumptions that we don't really know yet. For example, a major revenue source we think is going to be the college. We have to really flesh that out. And also, the operator that comes in, what kind of staffing needs are they going to have? Staffing becomes also a function of how much subsidy you need, correct?
Correct.
So we'll have much better numbers for you once the proposals come in. On the other hand, I couldn't tell you right now if we'll even get proposals. So there's a lot of unknowns here. We're going to pray we get proposals. Duncan has already spoken to some people, correct?
Yes.
And some people think we're going to get good proposals, and some people think we're not going to get any, right? So you want to speak to that?
Yes, so I have been sort of starting to work up a list, if you all are comfortable with the process, of at least a half a dozen firms based in Florida, South Florida, that we can send the RFQ and RFP to. Some of them I've known over the years to be sort of competent and professional managers of cities for facilities. In some cases, there are commercial organizations. So, for example, there's a company called Professional Facilities Management that runs the Performing Arts Center in Coral Springs. And they've done it for, gosh, I think I was there 15 years ago, helping get them in place. And coincidentally, there's a sort of a foundation, a friends group like here that works very closely with them. So they're a commercial for-profit organization contracted by the city. Another example is there are nonprofit facility managers, like the Broward Center actually operates other cultural facilities in other communities. So they operate the Parker Playhouse in downtown Fort Lauderdale. They're going to operate Aventura's new community arts center when that opens up. So you could also look at potentially a nonprofit organization that knows how to run buildings that might sort of extend their reach to Homestead to run this building.
One of the benefits of doing something like that, assuming any of those are interested in, and Broward Center is the perfect example, is Parker Playhouse is a separate facility, and yet if you go, the Broward Center has 2,700 seats in their theater plus another 800 seat, and they do Broadway shows, and they have almost every night they've got something going. And people are kind of trained now to go on that website to see what's playing. I'm here, what would I like to see this month? And if there's nothing playing at the Broward Center or it's sold out, you also see right on there that the Parker Playhouse is playing something too. So you get the synergy of having the eyeballs on the site already and their eyeballs that want to buy tickets. And so if we can find somebody that has that kind of an audience too, that'd be helpful too, whether we can get them or not.
Another good example is there's a group in Delray that operates a place called the Arts Garage. It's a very modest in terms of size, but very successful cultural facility there. And they've just been awarded the contract to run new cultural facilities in Pompano. So we've reached out to them as well to see if they would be interested in receiving the request for proposal and qualification to bring their skills down to Homestead.
Anything else, Mr. Williams?
Thank you.
Anybody else? One comment I would like to say. I'm sorry, who was that? Ms. Wallman? Go ahead.
I just wanted to say that I've had the opportunity to visit and meet twice with the curators of the Delray Historic Downtown Theater, and it's very impressive. It's, in my opinion, it's very different. Excuse me, it's very different than our city as far as the location and the different aspects. They have quite a complicated situation there. Is that they have an art gallery, They have, you know, different things that they do. I mean, they're very, very busy. I'd like to see that same thing happen here. They also have a beautiful parking garage right behind it, and with retail downstairs, and they all work together, you know, very unified. I also had the privilege, by invitation, to visit the Lake Worth Theater, the historic Lake Worth Theater. That was a trip. I loved it. I mean, you talk about still back in the day. I mean, that theater, they took me downstairs to the dressing rooms. I mean, you have to crawl under and over, and I mean, it's still very quaint. We're going to have a state of the art. But that Lake Worth Theater is packed constantly. All the people from Palm Beach go over to Lake Worth to see their plays, and they have something all the time. So that's what I'd like to see. I'd like to see professionals running professional operations, and actually I'm going back to Delray soon. When their season, I want to see some things when they're actually in you know, busy doing them. The same with Lake Worth. I encourage all of us to do a road trip. I think that it would be very beneficial to go together, because it's just amazing when you get to see something and dream that our theater could be like that, and it can be. So I just thought I'd throw that in.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay. First of all, I think that the Seminole Theater Group Board has been here since day one, and the continued collaboration between the city and the board is essential, because we are going to need to be able to raise funds, because I think our taxpayers really, some of the hesitancy was not about the rebuilding of the theater, but the cost of the subsidy that we were going to have to incur. So that component of the two groups together is, I think, essential for us as we go forward. So please continue that. And we have the two questions. So Ms. Faircloth and then Vice Mayor Shelley.
Thank you, Mayor. We really need to get this right, because our voters, our registered voters, they voted for this, and they are expecting us to make it happen. And in getting it right, you know, I'm all about inclusivity, and I feel that by placing this out for RFP, we professionally level the playing field. So you're asking for a direction from us as far as which approach you should take, and I feel that we should definitely place this out for an RFP to see who is interested in running this theater, because we don't have the skill set or level of expertise, and we're not in the business to run theaters, but we need someone who is skilled and competent in order to do so. So as for me and my position, I feel that we should place it out for an RFP so that we can get a good operator and make this a true win-win for this community.
And are you comfortable with the RFP for the planner as well?
Yes,
Okay.
I am.
Anything else, ma'am? Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. On the two issues I weigh in as well, I think that it's important that we get a professional group in here that's got the experience and the capability to really turn this theater into what we all envisioned it could be and what the voters want it to be and what we want it to be for our downtown. So I support the RFP process, the two-step process, and hopefully it yields a quality operator and a quality programming. I also want to commend the Seminole Theater Board for, you know, all their hard work and effort in getting us to where we are today, but also for sticking with it, to still wanting to be involved, to still trying to make sure that they can do whatever they need to do from the city's perspective, from us as an elected official's perspective, to get the word on the street, to raise money, to continue to make this theater, you know, again, the best theater it possibly can. So I thank you guys for showing up and continuing to stay involved in the process and to work with the city hand in hand on trying to make this a quality product.
Thank you, sir. And Ms. Wellman again?
I just didn't want to, I want to piggyback on what Mr. Vice Mayor said, because I certainly don't want to leave out the Seminole Theater. I mean, you guys stuck to it when there was just nothing to stick to, so I really appreciate it. And these theaters that I was just referring to, it'd be fun if you could go with us as well, because they have groups similar as our Seminole Board that are friends of the theater, and they work with those theaters. And community input is always very important, so thank you. Thanks for reminding me to say that. Thank you.
Is any council member opposed to the manager going forward with an RFP and an RFQ process? Okay, No one's opposed.
Thank you.
Anything else, Mr. Duncan?
No, I'll look forward to seeing you soon.
Anything else, Mr. Manager?
No, that's it. Thank you very much.
All right, sir. Tab 2.
Resolution of the City Council of the City of Homestead, Florida, ratifying an option agreement for purchase of a parcel of property, authorizing the city manager to exercise the city option and facilitate the purchase of the property, providing for implementation and an effective date.
Anything from staff, Mr. Manager?
Mayor, this is our ongoing effort to try to acquire the properties to help us expand Losner Park. We've been negotiating with the various property owners, and this particular property owner, the owner of the restaurant Nicomex, has expressed interest in not necessarily selling, but rather to have us move him, relocate him to a different property that's he could reopen his restaurant. And so what we have here is an option agreement for $500 for a restaurant that's located on Campbell, right next to the synagogue, and it's an old Chinese restaurant. And what he was, after we had tried various locations, which he didn't like, we told him, if there's some other property that you're interested in, let us know, and he identified this particular restaurant. But we have not yet worked out the deal with him, because the way we've been negotiating these properties is we establish a value for the property, and then we incorporate whatever else likely it would cost us in an eminent domain proceeding between legal fees and experts that the property owner would require us to pay for. And so our lawyers kind of give us a range of this is about as much as you can go and be able to justify a price. So what we're doing here is, okay, we're saying you're interested in this restaurant. We'll go ahead and purchase an option for $500, and then we're going to sit down and negotiate with him to see what is it that he wants for the total transaction, because our preference would be to basically give him whatever cash we can agree to, and then he goes ahead and he takes our contract and he purchases the restaurant. And with the cash, he can purchase the restaurant plus whatever extra he's got to do renovations or whatever he needs. So right now, this is a very tentative thing to just lock in the property so that we have the option to negotiate with him. And that's what you have before you.
Vice Mayor?
Yeah, just clarification. So it could be the full $430,000 purchase price, but at the same time, it could be significantly less based on the negotiations. So really, right at this point, we're agreeing to the $500 option, and then it'll come back to us, obviously, for a final vote on the total settlement price.
Right.
Correct?
I mean, our fear obviously is that he's going to want us to pay for the restaurant, plus he's going to want additional cash. I can tell you that all these property owners there's been a pattern of asking for a lot more than what their properties are worth. So I don't want to predict how this thing is going to go. I know that it's been somewhat bizarre along the way, and it takes a little while. We've been doing this dance with many of the property owners for quite a while now, and we think with most of them we've been able to come to a fair resolution. We think we'll be able to do that with this individual as well, but really at this point there's no guarantees other than you're not going to be bound to buy anything at this point. So it just gives you some options to negotiate with him. Worst case scenario, if it's the will of the board, then we can proceed with eminent domain. And so that's going to have to be also part of his equation is how much would he get. It's also how much is it going to cost us to do the dance of eminent domain. So we've tried to avoid that conflict as much as possible, and that's pretty much where we're at this point.
But all of that issues, that'll come back to us at another meeting, correct?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, Vice Mayor. Mr. Williams?
George, how many property owners are you going to be talking with to, how much property?
Right now, we have this one left, and we have the duplex owner who has basically told us not interested, wants to stay where he is. And so that one, we are moving forward with eminent domain. Other than that, everything else is locked in, right? Rick, there's no more. There's no more. This is really, it's this one and the duplex are the only ones that are left. And then, of course, as we talk about the potential parking garage site, those are also other things that we're starting to develop in terms of doing some appraisals and talking to property owners. But in terms of the expansion of Losner Park, these are the only two properties that are left, Nicomex and the duplex.
So the duplex, we're looking at eminent domain,
That would be the plan, yes.
and what will happen to those persons who live there?
We're going to have to,
Evict them?
yes.
For what? A parking garage?
No, this is the expansion of Losner Park.
Losner Park. All right, thank you, Mayor.
Any other questions or comments from the council? Okay, this is a public hearing. Anyone from the public like to speak for or against this, you're welcome to come at this time. Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Is there a motion? It's just a 500. It's moved by the Vice Mayor. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Burgess. Final comments, roll call, Madam Clerk.
Councilman Williams?
Yes.
Councilwoman Fairclough?
Yes.
Councilman Burgess? Councilwoman Wallman?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Shelley?
Yes.
Mayor Porter?
Yes.
The motion carries.
Tab 3.
A resolution of the City Council of the City of Homestead, Florida, waiving formal competitive bidding requirement for the purchase of a display booth, which is to be used by the city at the municipal participant sector of the ISIC-SC region Recon Trading Show being held May 2015 in accordance with City Code Section 2-411B, exemptions from competitive bidding, authorizing the transaction, providing for an effective date. This requires a 2/3 vote.
Mr. Manager?
Yeah, there are a couple of issues with this item. First one, as we were looking internally, is this booth a professional service or is it a purchase? We had a lot of internal debate because you need somebody to design the item, and then you also need somebody to build the item. And so most of these booth designers, they're kind of one-stop shop operations. And also, what's kind of driven our timeline that we're here now is because the first big event that we want to utilize this booth for is the shopping center conference. The booth itself, its lifespan is somewhere between 3 to 5 years. And the plan is to utilize this booth for retail attraction efforts and our economic development attraction efforts, plus whatever other public relations initiatives that the council, the CRA board would like to do. In essence, if we're going to bring retail to the downtown that currently doesn't exist, well, let me start from the beginning. Retailers, for the most part, come to cities when developers decide they're going to build something, and they go out there and they shop around for retailers to fill their shopping centers. And so what will happen is, and some of you who are attending the conference, you'll see plenty of retail development projects where developers are there trying to attract the retailers so that they can start and build their project. Some of them won't get their financing unless they have a good portion of their centers leased out, so the bank can guarantee some income, and it maximizes the chance of the center being successful. But in other areas where developers are less interested in building, cities have found that they need to get into the game themselves. And so we've talked a lot about potentially redeveloping the old police station site, maybe putting a parking garage there, maybe doing some street-level retail. But all of that, we'll need to figure out how we're going to fill those spaces. Also, if we have those parking garage spaces, some of the other spaces, retail spaces along Chrome, are more likely to have value to national retailers once they understand what's happening in the downtown. But in order to do that, you need to sell. And so we have hired a consultant by the name of Buxton that has gone through all of the credit card transactions to try to get a sense of where do people in Homestead and the surrounding area spend their money, and what kind of retailers would likely be successful here. And so we have some preliminary data, and the idea would be to start meeting with these retailers, and the first phase of this would be in May. We're hoping Buxton will be able to line up some retailers for us so that we can meet. And if you look at the design of the booth, you'll see it's kind of two halves. The first half is, the front half is just the greeting area, and the back half is where you'd actually meet with the retailers and discuss with them the plans of the city. There's a lot of photos that we haven't yet decided on. These were just placeholders, but and we'd have to have another discussion with you about what is it, the look and the feel of the booth. We know this is the proposed structure of the booth. We want it to be functional enough where we can use it for the purposes that we need. And really, it comes down to making our best efforts to try to attract retailers and other. Ultimately, we see once we shift away from some of the downtown initiatives, we're going to be thinking about the old City Hall property. We're going to be thinking about other, Park of Commerce, other areas that we're looking to try to attract investors. And so, but for developers, the only ones that we can really count on are ourselves. So that's the intent of this booth, and the resolution here would be for recommending the attached resolution authorizing the purchase of the special display booth for Featherlight exhibits for $65,915.
Questions from council? Mr. Burgess?
Thank you. So it is the intention of the staff to make sure that this is well taken care of and then use it time and time again as we put the other projects out there?
Yes, and we also, as we were talking with the different groups, we wanted a booth that staff was capable of assembling and disassembling, and that we were able to ship. And I'm told, and I just get a public confirmation, this particular booth, staff will have the competence level to assemble and disassemble this, right? It's an easy, you don't need to be a construction expert.
That's correct. It's very similar to assembling a tent.
So that's the intent.
Okay. So the pictures would be updated, and even though it seems like a big expense up front, it's going to be used 4 or 5 different times as we take different projects out as the anticipation of the project?
Our hope is 3 to 5 years, and also our hope is if by year 1 or 2, some of the things that we have on the facade of these, the photos, and may end up becoming irrelevant if we end up building a garage in a retail center, if we end up filling it up, we may want to replace some of those photos and maps with the next big thing that you all want to focus on. But so our hope is 3 to 5 years, so you'd say the 65,000 divided by that period of time and divided by the amount of shows that we do. Obviously, there'll be a regular cost of shipping, but that's the name of the game.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. My understanding, too, I know I've had a chance to meet and look over the details here, but one of the selling points for me was the fact that it's a big booth in its current form as you're presenting to us for the upcoming Vegas retail experience, but it also can be shrunk down to smaller sizes. So if we decide to put ourselves on display at one of the League of Cities events or other smaller venues across the state or the country, this would be multifaceted in that it could be a small booth or it could be a giant booth, is my understanding. So it's something that we could use for other purposes as well.
Yes.
Is that correct? No? Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Fairclough?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. When I initially saw the price, I was a bit taken aback.
I know. Me too.
And very hesitant to proceed with
Yes.
this. But then I felt a bit comfortable knowing that we can use this for other purposes and other events. So it's like a multi-purpose booth. And then if we're making the effort to go up there, we have to put our best foot forward. Presentation is everything.
Yes.
We can't go up there with this makeshift booth, and then expect someone to come to the city of Homestead. So knowing that we can use this for multiple purposes and it's going to put a great showing for us in Las Vegas, then I felt a bit more comfortable proceeding.
And good news, thank you for that, and good news, the Chamber of Commerce is actually sending representatives at their own expense to come and join us and be a part of the booth and part of the sales pitch, and we have some staff going as well. And so far everything's going well. Once we get through tonight, assuming you're supportive of this, then we're going to try to start reaching out to the retailers to try to set up as many meetings as we can while we're there.
Anything else? Ms. Wallman?
Yes, thank you. I was just going to say there's another one, I think it's in August, in Orlando, and we'll already be at the League of Cities, so it'll be convenient just to I think the league ends on Saturday and the conference starts on Sunday. So that's close by. Also, I've done this once before with the Bureau, Convention Visitors Bureau, and also with the Governor's Conference of Tourism. So, and I had to do it with just fold up tables and, oh my goodness, I mean, it was horrible. I had a U-Haul truck that we were sending up, and this is so much more professional, and I support it completely. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to go to Las Vegas for this one, but I will be there in Orlando, so.
Thank you.
Mr. Burgess?
Thank you, yes. Just to echo what Councilwoman Faircloth said, I too was taken back, but when you look at the investment that we're making downtown, this is a drop in the bucket to put our best foot forward. And we're there. Let's not nickel and dime stuff out here at the end. Let's make sure that we bring everything forward that needs to be forward and do everything above board and the way that we have moved things forward and do that. So with that, I will leave it, and I'm in support of it, and I think that the manager once again has shown that he and his team have a good vision of what they're doing downtown, and as they move forward, the direction they're taking and what they cover all the bases to make sure that no details are left uncovered. So, thank you.
Thank you.
And on the heels of everybody's comments, I would say that one thing that we've got to realize is we have to be careful about waiting for someone up north to do to us what they want to do to us. This makes it proactive for us to be able to go out and search and seek out the things that we want as a community, as opposed to being told what we're going to get through their economic development process. So, okay, this is a public hearing. Anyone would like to speak for or against this, you're welcome to come up at this time. Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Any final comments from council? Is there a motion?
Move it.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call, Madam Clerk.
Councilwoman Fairclough,
Yes.
Councilman Burgess,
Yes.
Councilman Williams,
Yes.
Councilwoman Wallman,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Shelley,
Yes.
Mayor Porter,
Yes.
the motion carries.
Is there a motion to adjourn? Special call? Moved and seconded. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. How many minutes? 5 minutes?